Thank you, Lennon. Thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon to one and all who is present here for the session. So let's begin with the session without any delay. Okay, so today we will be dealing with the compliance, POSH compliance for employers. And before we actually begin with the POSH, let us have a short introduction about from where this POSH came from. So it was in 1992, there was this lady called Banwari Devi, who was a social worker in Rajasthan, was brutally gang raped, and that is when this POSH was came into a big limelight. And following that, in 1997, Supreme Court has laid down a Vishaka committee where it laid down guidelines for every workplace. And it was in 1999, Supreme Court held that physical contact is not essential for sexual harassment. In 2012, Supreme Court has directed all the states to enforce compliance. And that is when, in 2013, POSH Act came into force, which is Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace. And in 2017, the central government has launched a portal where a women employee can drop in complaints regarding a sexual harassment. And in 2023, an organization who do not follow the POSH compliance properly has terminated the employee based on this POSH complaint, and that termination was set aside. And in 2025, as a development, Supreme Court has directed to conduct a district-wide survey across all organizations to look into where the POSH committee is not set up by the organization. Now we will move on to the actual session of what POSH is. So this entire session will be dealing with four important questions. And what are those questions? Initially is, does it apply to me? And what must I put in place? A complaint has landed, and what if I do nothing? So we will be handling all these four important questions during this session. And if you may have any questions, please have it and we can discuss it at the end of the session. Let's move on to the first question. Does it apply to me? Yes. Organization where it has 10 employees, minimum of 10 employees or more than that, is definitely and mandatorily required to set up a POSH committee. So, say for example, if your office has multiple administrative units, multiple branches, do you require to set up a POSH committee? Yes. Every administrative unit or every branch of your organization where there is minimum of 10 employees needs a POSH committee that needs to be set up. And what if your organization has less than 10 workers or 10 employees for that matter? You're not required to set up a POSH committee. However, if there is any complaint on POSH, that will be addressed through the district officer, which is set up at the district collector office. And if there is any complaint that is against actual employer, and that complaint needs to be addressed directly to the district officer and not by the POSH committee. We'll have a detailed discussion more on this topic. So who do you count as 10 employees? That 10 employees are not just employees who are listed under your pay list. It also covers other employees who are the regular employees who are covered in your payroll list, temporary employees, contractual based employees, domestic workers, and daily wage employees. All these employees are covered as your employees who directly or indirectly or through an agent is contacting you or coming into your workplace while discharging their official duty. Yes, they are all treated as your employees. And who does this act protect? This act protect any women, regardless of any age, who is employed or who steps into your office on discharging her official duty, or any vendor and agency staff working on your premises. Say, for example, your domestic workers who just steps into your office for some 10 or 15 minutes and steps out. Even those domestic employers will be treated as your employee, and all these women will be protected under this act.
ಮತ್ತೇನು ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಸರ್ ಹಂಗಾದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತಿಗೆ?
Sorry? Yes. So where does your workplace end? Does your workplace ends within the four premises of the organization? Definitely no. Your workplace extends to multiple places. the client side, the cab, the conference hall, place, the hotel, the team dinner, and even the screen. I'll explain what it is. If your employee is traveling to your client side, if your employee is on a duty and they have sent your employee to discuss with the other organization, that place will be considered as your workplace. And if there is any harassment that has taken place in the client side, will be taken back to your POSH committee place, and complaint can be preferred there. Yes. Yes. Next, the cab. If your employee is traveling in the cab that you have provided and she faces sexual harassment during that time while she is traveling, so any sexual harassment that has taken place during the transportation through the cab that has been provided, even that will be considered as a workplace. And the third category is the conference. Say, for example, if you're conducting a conference, or if you're conducting a conference outside of your work premises, and there is some sexual harassment that has taken place at the conference venue, that will also be considered as a workplace. The hotel.
Group medic.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes, I'll continue. So while discussing on the hotel, if you are arranging accommodation for your employee during the time of travel, and while she is staying at the hotel, she faces a sexual harassment, even that hotel will be considered as a workplace, because she was there while she is discharging her duty. So if she faces any harassment during that time, yes, that harassment can be reported to the POSH committee that is set up in your workplace. And next comes to the team dinner. Say, for some celebration, you take all your team members for a dinner, and during that time an employee faces a sexual harassment, and that harassment can definitely be considered as a POSH harassment, and it can be reported to the POSH committee, and that place will definitely be treated as a workplace, because it was organized by the organization, and hence that will also be considered as a workplace. Next comes the screen. While your employee is on a virtual call, and during that call, they if the fellow employee shows some sexual gestures or inappropriate gestures, and she might be working from home, even that is considered as a workplace. She might be working from home, but she's discharging her duty, and that harassment during the virtual meeting will definitely be considered as a POSH compliant. And next, the most important factor under POSH is not a gender neutral law. So who can give a complaint under POSH Act is a woman, definitely a woman. And aggrieved person is always a woman under POSH Act. Against whom can she prefer a complaint? It can be against both men and women. Can only a male be a respondent under this category? Definitely no. Even a woman who has harassed the women under different categories will be, which falls under the POSH, will be considered as a respondent under this act. And for you to protect both men and women without any discrimination, you will have to adopt a gender neutral policy under your organization policy, and that needs to be addressed, and that has to address all the complaints made by the male person. So moving on to the next slide, the two important elements in this POSH Act, the conduct and unwelcome. So what are the contacts that is actually considered as sexual harassment? Any physical contact or advances, or a demand of sexual favors, sexually colored remarks, or showing pornography, or any such contact will be considered as a sexual nature. So I will explain what is all the sexual demand or contact while dealing with pornography or any other contact. Say, for example, if a male employee is watching pornography while a female employee is sitting beside him, that can be considered as a sexual harassment.
ShanumugaPriya, sorry, I have one question. So actually, you said the complaint will give regarding the thing. So there will be the verbal complaint, or the how it will be the complaint, with the proof or without the proof? How do we consider it that?
So yes, thank you for the question, but please wait. Let us complete the session. Please save your question. I will answer all your questions at the end of the session. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So while I was on pornography, there is, and later on, if a sexual harassment complaint is preferred by the female employee stating that her fellow employee was watching pornography sitting right beside her, he cannot later say that he was just watching and he wasn't showing it to the female employee. No, just watching or showing pornography just sitting beside the female employee will be considered as a sexual harassment, and that complaint will be taken to the POSH committee. And while dealing with unwelcome, I'll put an example for this for you to understand it in a better way. Say, for example, a female employee from your organization has a male friend who is very close with the female employee, and she doesn't have any problem with all his physical contact or advances, whereas there is some other male employee who's trying to do the same advancement or puts in other physical activities same as her male friend. The female do not feel welcome about that, and when she prefers a complaint before the committee stating that she do not welcome all those activities done by the male employee, that male employee cannot say that he was exactly doing what her male friend was doing to her. No, it doesn't matter what your intent was, it only matter how it impacted. A female employee can feel welcoming if the same physical contact or advancement done by her male friend as welcoming, but she may feel unwelcome if the same was reiterated or done by some other person. There is always this unwelcoming, and how does it impact the female employee, that really matters. So while moving on to the contact, I will be explaining detailing as how the contact is put into the sexual harassment of POSH. So quid pro quo is nothing but, say for example, if your senior employee impliedly or explicitly asking you for some sexual adjustment, stating that he would give you a preferential treatment, or that he would give you a increment or promotion, and if you're not ready to heed to his demand, he's threatening to fire you from your position. So all these things will be covered under sexual harassment under POSH Act. And what is hostile environment? You create an environment to your female employee in such a way that it is very intimidating to her, that is very offensive, or you are humiliating her appearance, or you are passing sexual comments, or you are passing comments in a disrespectful manner. All those things will be covered under sexual harassment, and those complaints will definitely be taken to the POSH committee. Next, so while we were discussing what POSH is and what are all the complaints that can be taken into POSH, it is really necessary to understand what POSH does not cover. So, say for example, if your senior manager or if your reporting officer is giving you a performance feedback, or if they are changing your work allocation, or if the senior employee is generally rude, or if you are in some consensual relationship with other person, or if you have any personal dispute, and if you would like to satiate that vengeance through this POSH complaint, no, all these will never be covered under POSH. General performance, or you getting transferred to other places, or your shifts getting changed, and that is all based on reasonable, and that has reasonable reasons for it to happen, definitely all this will not be covered under POSH. It will be covered under organization policy, and if you may have any opinion on the same, you will have to address it before the organization policy and not before the POSH. So what are the 10 duties as employer? It is the most important duty for the employer to provide a safe working environment for all its employees. Your employer should regularly organize awareness program, should regularly give training to the internal committee, and secure all the attendance of the respondents and the complainant who has preferred the complaint. And if the employee wants to prefer a complaint before a police officer at police station, you will have to assist her throughout the process, and you will have to make sure that you display the penal consequences that follows up if the POSH compliance comes to your notice. And you will have to put up every posters in conspicuous place. And here the conspicuous place is nothing but a place which is generally known to all employees, where they on a daily basis where they look into, so that they get to know about the POSH policy and what it does to the employees if they do not follow it. And they also have to provide every facilities to all the committee members, employees, to prefer a complaint before the committee, and all such things has to be maintained by the employer. And the employer also has to ensure that timely reports by the internal committee reaches the district officer. Next, moving on to the internal committee. So far, I was discussing about the internal committee and how the internal committee will take all the complaints. Now, we will see as to what is internal committee. A internal committee should have a presiding officer, definitely a woman employed at a senior level, and 2 other members among your employees, and 1 external member who you can hire from an NGO or an advocate who has familiarity or who has expertise in this matter, especially who has expertise in civil, criminal, and all labor laws, and who has expertise in women handling with women cases. So those persons can be hired as an external member. What is the quorum of the committee? It is the quorum required is 3 for inquiring into any matter, and half of the committee should be a woman, and the committee should be reconstituted in every 3 years. So you all must be having a question. What if my organization has only male employees? What do I do? Should I hire a female employee for the purpose of appointing them as a presiding officer? Definitely not. If your company has only all 10 employees, you are definitely required to set up a POSH committee. That is no doubt if your company has a minimum of 10 employees. But when your company doesn't have a senior women, you can hire the senior women from a different organization or from a different administrative unit that you have, or a different branch that you may have. So that is how you appoint a presiding officer. And what do you do for other 2 members? The very same employee, the male employee from your organization, can be a member. And while dealing with the external member, obviously you will have to hire them from outside. As I was explaining in the earlier slide, they might be from NGO or even from advocacy background, and they can act as an external member, and the external member can be a male or female. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so how do you put up this policy display, and how do you make things aware among your employees? This policy, you will have to draft a POSH policy before you set everything in place. And how do you put up everything in the display? So you will have to display at a conspicuous place, as I was explaining earlier, on a A3 sheet, on the notice board, or on the circular board, or on the website, anywhere and everywhere where an employee the on a daily basis gets to see the notice. So that is where you put up all the notice stating all the penal consequences that occur if your employee do not follow the rules. And that is what the display actually has to serve. And the next training, coming to next training, you will have to conduct a training, regular training to your IC members, and also have to conduct an awareness program once in 6 months regularly on POSH policy, and what are all the consequences if the POSH compliance is not followed. And you will have to record every single session, because you will have to submit the annual report to the district officer. And how a complaint reaches you. I had this question from someone, so I hope this answers your question. If not, I'll definitely answer you at the end of the session. So, if an employee is preferring a complaint to you, it must be in writing. Anything and everything should be in writing. In writing, if she is preferring a complaint to you, she has to give 6 copies of complaint to the committee members. So how do they reach out to the committee members? While I was discussing about the displaying of penal consequences, you will also have to display all the committee members that has been constituted by you. So you will have to display who are all the presiding members, who are all the other 2 members, and who is the external member. Only through them they will be able to place their complaint. They'll be able to contact them, and there will be common email that will be set up for this, or they can meet them in person and give them in writing. So this is how they reach out to the internal committee members. And when do they prefer the complaint? Within 3 months of the incident. So if she is not able to prefer a complaint before within 3 months, and if she has substantiative reasons as to why she was not able to prefer a complaint within 3 months, that reason may be recorded and the time may be extended accordingly. This is not a stringent timeline that needs to be followed. If the reason is substantiated, yes, definitely 3 months time can be extended, but normally within 3 months from the date of incident, a complaint has to be preferred before the internal committee. So once the committee has received a complaint, what do the committee do? The committee receives a complaint and sends the notice to the respondent. What if a person who wants to prefer a who wants to prefer a complaint, do not know how to write down the complaint? It is the duty of the committee to help her in writing the committee. Can the committee members? Yes. Okay. Can the committee members themselves are allowed to write down the complaint? Definitely no. With the help of the person, her family members or friends or any other co-workers can write down the complaint. Upon obtaining her consent, she can place the complaint before the committee members, but the committee members themselves cannot write down the complaint. And as I was explaining earlier, 6 copies has to be given to the committee members. Next. So I was telling you right now, while she cannot prefer a complaint directly, she can take the help of other person. So in these scenarios, how does it proceed further? When she is physically unable, when she cannot prefer a complaint, while that is a situation, she can get the help from a co-worker or officer of the National or State Commission for Women, or any person who has knowledge of the incident, can write down the complaint after taking her written consent. And while you're submitting the complaint to the committee member, that written consent along with the complaint needs to be submitted before the internal committee.
At 1 o'clock.
While she is mentally unable. So what do you do in this scenario? In this scenario, you will definitely not be able to obtain her consent. So what do you do in this scenario? You can write down the complaint through her relative or friend or a special educator or qualified psychiatrist or psychologist or a guardian or the authority under whose care she is receiving treatment. So this has to be done jointly with one of the above. So that is how you take the complaint from the mentally unable women, and then you proceed with the inquiry. And what if she is deceased? In that case, you obtain the written consent from her legal heir, and then you proceed before the committee. Yes. Moving on to the next slide. What is the time period throughout this inquiry? Will it goes on forever? No. Every stage has a stipulated time. As I was explaining earlier, there is this 3 months time where she has to prefer a complaint from the date of the incident. And once a committee receives the complaint, within 7 working days, the committee has to send a notice to the respondent asking for his reply. And from the date of receiving the notice from the committee, the respondent within 10 working days has to submit his reply with all the supporting documents. And once all these procedure is done, before the inquiry commences, there will always be a room for conciliation. If at all, if the complainant wants to close this once for all under conciliation, yes, it can be done, but not on monetary basis. Without including this monetary settlement, the conciliation can be done based upon her terms and conditions. And if the conciliation is not happening and if the inquiry has begun, what happens? Within 90 days, this inquiry should be over. And if there is any delay in closing this inquiry within 90 days, that reason should also be written down in writing as to why within 90 days the inquiry was not been able to close. And after 90 days, technically the 100th day, the employer receives the report once the inquiry is over. So after 90 days the inquiry is over, within 10 days the report is generated by the internal committee, and once the employer receives the report from the internal committee, the employer needs to act upon the report within 60 days. So once the employee, say for example, if he is terminated based on the misconduct proved upon the examination done by the internal committee, upon his order, if the aggrieved person is not satisfied on the order, they can definitely prefer an appeal within 90 days. And where does a person can prefer an appeal? They can prefer an appeal before the district officer. And there is this also one thing: if a person prefers a complaint before a POSH, can she be allowed to prefer a complaint before police of station? Yes, both complaints can run parallelly. So it is no bar. If she prefers a complaint before POSH, she cannot prefer a complaint before police station, or vice versa. Both complaints can run parallelly. So during the time of inquiry, what is the protection that the victim gets? What does the protection does a aggrieved woman obtains during this inquiry? She can ask for transfer. Either she can be transferred only upon her consent, or the respondent can be transferred, and she can ask for leave up to 3 months. That is a paid leave for her, or the reporting person can be changed, because when there is a scenario where the harassment has been occurred because of her own reporting person, that reporting person can be changed. And if it's an educational institution and it is the respondent who has been supervising her, that supervisor can be changed. So all these options are available to the victim during the inquiry runs, and all these interim measures can be given to the victim if she is asking for the same in writing. So only upon writing you give all her the interim measures, but it is either or, not all the three internal measures can be granted at same time. So how does the inquiry ends? So once you receive the complaint, you also call for a respondent, you receive the reply, and you examine all the evidences that has been submitted from both the end, and after which you generate a report. And upon the report, you find it that it is not proved. If a complaint is not proved, does it mean is it a false complaint? Definitely no. There may be instances where there will not be any evidences, but the act would have been committed for sure. So in that cases, without any evidences, the act might not be proved, but it shall not be considered as a false complaint. If the complaint is closed as a not proved complaint, then no action may be taken from the committee. But if the complaint is proved, if the misconduct is proved, what do? You deduct a sum of amount from a salary that may be paid as a compensation to the victim. And how do you assess this compensation? This compensation is assessed based on the mental trauma that was undergone by the victim, based on the emotional distress, and based on the financial loss that was incurred, or any medical expenses that has been incurred by the victim. So that is how you assess the compensation. And what if he has left the organization completely without paying this compensation? That can definitely be recovered through the district officer, through the arrear of land revenue, and that is how it can be recovered. So next, coming to conciliation, confidentiality, and retaliation. As I was mentioning earlier, this conciliation is only upon the request of the victim women. No internal committee can voluntarily ask the women to get into the process of conciliation without her consent. She can never be compelled for the same, and no monetary settlement can be a part and parcel of the conciliation process. Definitely no. The settlement records will be based on the terms and conditions that is mutually agreed by two persons, and definitely not on the basis of monetary settlement. And regarding the confidentiality, throughout this inquiry, no information about the victim or about the respondent, or during the course of time what are all the events that unfolded during the inquiry, nothing will be sent out, nothing will be published without the consent of the victim. Because if that happens, if the confidentiality gets breached, you will be imposed a fine on that, and that will be extended up to 5,000. So while coming to retaliation, say for example, if you're preferring a complaint against your senior officer and he retaliates on the same, he does every possible thing to get back on you. So what do? Can that be brought into this POSH? No, that cannot be brought into POSH, this retaliation act. That can be dealt separately under the organization policy. So, moving on to the other important factor. What if a woman is preferring a complaint with a malicious intent? What if she is lying? And what are the consequences that follows if a complaint proves to be false? So, what the act says is, if a woman is lying, if the woman has preferred a complaint with a malicious intent, and this has been found after the thorough examination of the evidences and all the facts that has been placed before the internal committee. So what does the POSH committee do? What does the internal committee do? So the internal committee may recommend a disciplinary action upon the discretion of the organization. The POSH Act as such do not list out the reprimands that can be given to the women who has preferred a false complaint, but the organization policy will definitely include all the warnings or all the steps that can be taken against a woman if she is found to have preferred a false complaint. And that's how a complaint preferred by a woman which is found to be false can be managed. And finally comes to the annual report. You have complied with all the procedures that was discussed before. And how do you let the government know that you have complied everything? How do you let the government know that you are in parlance with the act? So this is where it comes. After complying with all the earlier requirements I was explaining, you set up an awareness program, you set up a committee, and you conduct training program. Once in a while you convene a meeting and you record everything with all the minutes of the meeting taken into record, and everything has to be penned down, everything has to be recorded. And if you have any compliance, and if you have taken an action against the complaint, everything has to be penned down. And if you do not have any complaint, even that needs to be penned down. So you will submit a report to the district officer of your district, which is in the same calendar year, and the dates might differ based upon the different districts, but during the end of the calendar year you will have to submit the annual report to the district officer, and upon perusing the same you will get a report from the district officer confirming your annual report. And that is how you inform the government that you are in parlance with the act. Okay, so while we are on topic, what POSH compliance has to be? So what non-compliance actually cost you? It really costs you a lot. So if you do not set up a committee, or if you do not take any action against the POSH compliance, or if you are in breach of any other laws that has been in that has been put into POSH, so what does it actually gets into? You will be fined up to 50,000. Is this all? Definitely no. If the government or if the district officer gets to know that your organization do not have a POSH committee, so this is where it really gets you into a great cause. Your license will be cancelled, or you might be put into a danger where your license will not be renewed. So this is not something that you pay 50,000 fine and there it ends. Definitely not. It goes on until your cancellation of your license or non-renewal of your license if the district officer, while conducting the survey, or if they are coming into your workplace for inspection, for getting to know that you are in parlance with the compliance, and if they get to know that you have not set up a POSH committee yet, and if you're not following with all the compliance that needs to be done, definitely there is a high risk that your license may get cancelled. So this is the actual cost that comes into your organization, and it is not about 50,000. So this will be the quick recap of what we have discussed all along. So 5 things that needs to be in place: a policy that needs to be framed, a committee that needs to be formed, as how I explained now, awareness program that needs to be put up before all the employees, and training for all the internal committee members, and process which needs adherence, and records that has all the records of the board reports and all the compliance report that needs to be submitted to the district officer.